and corridors of linking these settlements with West Jerusalem as part of the Israeli claim for a new definition of the city, including the block of Ma'ale Adumim, which is the largest settlement in the West Bank, one of the largest settlements, with an area which is just the municipal area is 51 square kilometers, which is even bigger than Tel Aviv as a city, as the main Israeli hub and the main Israeli city. The Palestinian proposal was accepting, in a way, the built-up area of settlements. Ma'ale Adumim was out. They didn't accept Ma'ale Adumim to be part because this is going to cut the Palestinian contiguity of the state, linking the south with the north, and Har Homa, which was built during the peace process, was not included, but they accept to include all the settlements in West Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, and in the Gush Etzion area. You know, that's until all these proposals, they have to do with territorial demographic considerations. But there is still, as an urban planner, I think it's my duty to raise the issue of the functionality of Jerusalem as a city. How a geopolitical proposal or a scenario could serve better the city as a center, as a capital for Palestine, at the same time a capital and a center for the Israeli side. One of the challenges that geopolitical solution, they must be based on political separation. I'm stating the obvious, but definitely there is a need for a multi-layer and a multidisciplinary model. We need to look at the functionality of the city, the different functions, the different fabrics, and being aware that political agreements alone cannot promote stability at the urban level. This diagram shows the different layers of functionality. The more we talk about political, national, symbolic, the more we want to get to full separation, which is all about national inspiration. The more we talk about a kind of interest map, environmental issues, image quality, international functions of the city, the more we intend to go to a more level of a highest level of cooperation, if not integration, and to look at the overall interest of the city, which need to be politically divided, but still in terms of functionality, it will keep some of its joint functions, and they need to find a solution. There's definitely a huge gap between East and West, and this was not raised within the negotiation. There's an asymmetric relation and asymmetric structures between the two sides. And just to give you a figure, in order to develop the Palestinian infrastructure in Jerusalem, to bring it to a level of West Jerusalem, which is not the best in terms and compared to other Israeli cities like Tel Aviv, there's a need for $700 million to be invested immediately to improve infrastructure. So there is a huge gap between East and West in terms of infrastructure, services, and the urban structure and the organizational setups. If we talk about peace, stability, there is definitely a need to establish an equality-based dual urban system, because we don't want to have the poor next to the rich, and actually it's the poor next to the poor, because Israel, actually Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, is the poorest Israeli city, with 1/3 of the Jewish population under poverty line. It's completely subsidized by the government. Majority work of its economy, it's related to the government positions. If I try to put all this, the formal, informal relation and negotiations, I can come with this diagram of different scenarios. The dialogue, as you see, between 1996 to 2000 was more related to the open city under peace conditions. And that was the informal negotiations. Later on, it was mainly the formal negotiations dealing with peace under a divided city, a separation, a physical separation. And actually we are in between you see the conflict and conflict and separation, which that's identified the city today. I mean, it characterized Jerusalem, a city of conflict, but it's heavily divided. It is not a one city, it is divided cities, despite the fact that there's no physical borders between East and West, but there's definitely a psychological and other fear borders. The geopolitical solution for the future of Jerusalem, they should be based on the principle of territory, sovereign political separation, and not based on the current Israeli demographic and settlement facts on the ground. Usually we intend to accept what Israel is, and we know the game. They are actually stated clearly that we want to create facts on the ground to make it difficult to reach an agreement. There is no way to cope with these facts on the ground, and they need to be revised. The political division should be based on a clear border, a contiguous East Jerusalem as a Palestinian capital, and separate from West Jerusalem with its own center, its own capital, and not an Israeli redefinition of Palestinian Jerusalem. The Israelis have no right whatever to define where is the municipal borders of Jerusalem, and if we talk about a vibrant city, if we talk about sustainable peace, all the demographic territorial domination thinking is an obstacle for the peace process. The urban functions and to perform as a Palestinian center and the capital, that should be given a priority in the geopolitical negotiations, and this is, I think, one package. It needs to be addressed by the Palestinian team, and to put this functional, urban, social, economic, daily life issues as part of the needs of the Palestinians, because Israeli for 50 years they discriminated against Palestinians, and they pushed us into 13% of the built-up area of East Jerusalem, annexed East Jerusalem. This is the reality of today. Separation wall cutting Jerusalem from its hinterland. Ramallah and Bethlehem, they are both satellite towns of Jerusalem. That's a very important fact to remember. East Jerusalem is the core of the urban zone of Palestine in terms of contiguity, in terms of urban fabric. This is a one urban fabric. This is one unit. You can't separate Ramallah, Jerusalem, and Bethlehem. And there is definitely a need to look at a vision where urbanized center of Palestine is Jerusalem. That's a fact. It's a historical fact. The spatial interaction between East and West and its surrounding will determine the viability of the Palestinian state. And usually we discuss Jerusalem like a separate issue, but it is part of the West Bank. It is part of the Palestinian fabric that need to be addressed this way. East Jerusalem urban core will function as a political capital and the main social, economic, and cultural center. Development of coherent planning process between the urbanized core, which is Jerusalem, the northern and the southern region, Nablus and Hebron, Gaza, will promote social and economic inclusion and create balanced urban policy and practices. This is very important to look at the context of the Palestinian territory rather than dealing with fragmented territorial demands. Ramallah and Bethlehem will share with Jerusalem part of the administrative and services functions as a one urban unit. East Jerusalem will be a hub for gateways. This is the main transportation axis with the external world, both at the regional level with Israel, Jordan, and Egypt, and at the global level with the seaport, with the airport. So if we not move this way, I think Israelis are going to lose on the long term. Even medium term, they are calculating on gaining more time to push the settlement in Jerusalem, but with the 400,000 Palestinians, with the largest Palestinian city in the West Bank and Gaza, actually. If I will exclude refugees in Gaza city, Jerusalem is the largest Palestinian city. If Israelis will keep denying the fact that this is the largest Palestinian city, and there's definitely a need to address the geopolitical Palestinian demand and the urban functional rights, the Palestinian right to the city, which I consider as a main layer to the political right, not the other way around. Usually we intend to think, let's end the occupation first, and then we'll consider functionality urbanism. I think it's wrong. There's a need to look at the different layers and to avoid a religious conflict which is already there, and we are moving actually from a national conflict into a religious clash of civilization, which Jerusalem could civilize. As Berlin civilized the Cold War, Jerusalem could symbolize the clash of civilization between everyone. And I think Jerusalem, again, is the key. And in order to promote the best case scenario or the peaceful scenario, Israelis should consider their own interest and look at the Palestinian side instead of denying the fact that we don't exist. And for the Israelis, we don't exist. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Nasrallah for his presentation. Sir, your knowledge and expertise have benefited our participants here today. The ideas you have presented on possible solutions for Jerusalem are sure to generate lively debate when we come to that later. I just remind again that this theme is supposed to address the issue of getting solutions. Our next speaker is Mr. Gershon Baskin, who is the founder and currently co-chair of ICPCRI, the Israeli-Palestinian Creative Regional Initiative, a veteran of the peace movement in Israel. Baskin has initiated and ran a secret direct back channel between the Israeli government and Hamas that led to the October 2012 prisoner exchange. He is also involved in renewable energy projects. We are pleased to welcome you, sir, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, distinguished delegates. I'm going to present a vision for the future of Jerusalem. It's not an Israeli vision, it's not a Palestinian vision, it is my own vision. As a Jerusalemite, as a lover of Jerusalem, as someone who would not like to live anywhere else in the world but Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the microcosm and the nucleus of the entire Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Jerusalem is much more than a city, more than a physical space. It is a transcendental phenomenon encompassing the emotional energy that has propelled this conflict into violence for generations. Conventional wisdom throughout the years of the peace process has always been to leave Jerusalem until the end. Jerusalem is the issue on which the Camp David talks of July 2000 exploded. Jerusalem is where the Second Intifada erupted, where the latest round of violence began and centered around, and Jerusalem has been the constant source of strife in all the past years. I have always believed that Jerusalem should have been the first issue on the agenda. If we can resolve Jerusalem, everything else will be easier. That is why in August of 1989, I launched the first Israeli-Palestinian working group of experts on the future of Jerusalem. It was quite evident, even then, back in '89, that Jerusalem would be a focal point of any future Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Without finding a peaceful solution for Jerusalem, which would enable both sides to have their national capital in the city, there could be no peace. This has not changed. In 1992, after 3 years of intensive monthly meetings and an additional 6 long weekends together, we in IPCRI, the Israel-Palestine Center for Research and Information, published our first plan for sharing Jerusalem. It's important to note that I speak about sharing Jerusalem, not dividing it. The words in Hebrew are quite similar, but their different meanings are diametrically opposed. Lechalek et Yerushalayim, to divide Jerusalem, as opposed to litchalek b'Yerushalayim, to share Jerusalem. The plan was presented to Mayor Teddy Kollek a year before Oslo, and still, in my mind, remains the most viable solution for the future of Jerusalem. As part of the exercise in exploration for solutions, we prepared a map of the city color-coded by population groups within the city. It was strikingly clear that Jerusalem was a very segregated city. I believe the most segregated city in the world. Israelis and Palestinians live in separate areas. There are no common areas in the city. This observation immediately led to understanding that sovereignty in Jerusalem could be assigned to different neighborhoods on the basis of demography. We call this dispersed sovereignty. In the end of 2000, President Clinton, as Hibu Husseini said in his parameters for peace that he presented to the Israeli and Palestinian negotiators, created the terms of reference: what is Jewish for Israel, what is Arab for Palestine. Another principle that our 1992 plan shared with Clinton was that Jerusalem must remain an open city without physical boundaries, walls and fences, preventing free movement in the city. Jerusalem, after all, is an urban space where hundreds of thousands of people live, and walls and fences dividing the city into small pieces would kill the city and make it an impossible place to live and work in. This obviously presents a lot of challenges because there is no peaceful solution for Jerusalem without dividing the sovereignty of the city, but both sides must at the same time guarantee that the city would remain physically united and open. The separation wall that was built around the city in the south, east, and north was constructed to keep Palestinians out of the city. The law of unintended consequences resulted with the influx of some 60,000 Palestinians back into the city after its construction. These people, over the years from 1967, had moved out of the city, mostly to the north, where housing was available and cheaper than in Jerusalem. They moved back into the city out of fear of being cut off and possibly losing their rights to live in Jerusalem. There are some 360,000 Palestinians living in Jerusalem, the overwhelming majority of who are not Israeli citizens, but are residents of Jerusalem, according to Israeli law, inherited from the British. As residents, they have the right to run in municipal elections and to vote in them. The Palestinians in Jerusalem boycott those elections, rejecting Israel's claim to sovereignty over the whole city. They are nonetheless subject to Israeli policies and laws, and also enjoy some of the benefits of being residents of the State of Israel, mainly freedom of movement, national insurance, and access to Israel's healthcare services. Despite the benefits, most Palestinians in Jerusalem demand to be part of the Palestinian state and for Jerusalem to be its capital. This is not only because Palestinians in Jerusalem suffer from significant discrimination. There are arguments regarding the statistics of how many of Jerusalem's Palestinian residents would really prefer to be part of Palestinian state, or how many of them would prefer to remain in Israel. What is clear is that none of them agree to Jerusalem being physically divided, and no one agrees to having second-class status in Jerusalem. Israel has claimed since 1967 that Jerusalem is the eternal, united, undivided capital of the State of Israel and the Jewish people. But Jerusalem is very divided, definitely not united, and is not recognized by any government in the world as the capital of Israel. There is not one country in the world that recognizes Israel's sovereignty over all of Jerusalem. Before the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, Jerusalem was the center of Palestinian life, economically, culturally, educationally, religiously, and politically. Today, Jerusalem remains center only in the area of religion. Jerusalem has been cut off from Palestinians, and Palestinians have been cut off from Jerusalem. The physical border established by Israel after Oslo cuts Jerusalem off from Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel cynically exploited Palestinian agreement to leave Jerusalem as a final status issue to prevent the Palestinian Authority from having any access or input in Jerusalem. Israel refused to implement its obligations under the Roadmap for Peace of President George W. Bush, which required Israel to reopen Palestinian national institutions in Jerusalem, primarily the Orient House and the East Jerusalem Chamber of Commerce. Palestinians have no official role in Jerusalem. Since the death of Faisal Husseini in 2001, Jerusalem has been void of local leadership which could unite the people, and Israel has strongly enforced a divide and conquer mode of operation in the city to prevent the emergence of new leadership. Israel has ignored the development in most of the Palestinian areas, and even the police only enter those areas when engaged in anti-terrorist activities, leaving a largely lawless zone within Israel's eternal undivided capital. Jerusalem is not united, and there is no validity to the claim that united Jerusalem is the eternal capital of Israel. Today, both parties claim Jerusalem as their national capital. Israel asserts that Jerusalem is the cradle of Jewish civilization, the holiest city for Jews, and the focal point for Jewish existence. Jews all over the world turn towards Jerusalem in prayer, and inside of Jerusalem face the Temple Mount in the heart of Jerusalem's old city. The first direction of Muslim prayer was Jerusalem, but later changed to Mecca. It was from Jerusalem that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. Jerusalem is spoken about in Islam as Al-Aqsa, the distant mosque, and Beit al-Maqdas, the holy house, in reference to the Holy Temple. Jerusalem is the third most holy city in the world for Muslims, and according to their tradition, the obligation of Hajj is not complete until after Mecca and Medina, the pilgrim completes the journey with a visit to Jerusalem. The positions between the parties in Jerusalem are diametrically opposed and seem to be unbridgeable. The official policy of the Israeli government is that Jerusalem is and will always be the eternal undivided capital of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. Jerusalem will never be physically divided again, as it was for almost 19 years between 1949 and the end of Israel's War of Independence, and the Palestinian Nakba, the catastrophe, and the June 1967 war. In March 1949, King Abdullah I of Jordan annexed illegally East Jerusalem and the west bank of Jordan River to the Hashemite kingdom, and walls and barbed wire fences divided Jerusalem right through the middle of the city, cutting the old city of Jerusalem and the Jewish holy places off from Israel and the Jewish world. After the lightning speed six-day victory in 1967, the Jewish state tore down the walls and fences and reunited the city, vowing that it would never be divided again. Israel then illegally annexed all of East Jerusalem and expanded its borders in the east and placed the entire city under Israel's sovereignty and law. Like the Jordanian annexation in 1949, Israel's annexation was rejected by the international community and viewed it in contravention to international law. The Palestinians' position is that all of East Jerusalem, the territory occupied by Israel in 1967, must become the capital of the state of Palestine. This position officially includes more than 250,000 Israelis who today now live in that area in neighborhoods built by Israel since 1967 on what was formerly Palestinians' land. The Palestinian position is that the entire old city of Jerusalem, including the Jewish quarter and the Jewish holy places, will be under Palestinian sovereignty in a peace agreement. There are three concentric circles of issues in Jerusalem that need to be resolved. The closer to the center, the more difficult to resolve. Nonetheless, there are solutions for all of the issues of Jerusalem. Okay, sorry. The outer circle is the issue of the neighborhoods all around the city. The center circle is the old city. The heart of the hearts is the Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif. The neighborhoods already mentioned above are easiest to deal with because there are really no mixed neighborhoods. Every neighborhood is either Israeli or Palestinian, and the borders of the neighborhoods are equally clear, although they have to be determined by each side in negotiations. It is relatively easy to assign sovereignty to all of the neighborhoods. There are a few problematic areas which could be dealt with on an issue-to-issue basis, such as Palestinian enclaves in the French Hill and in Gilo, a Muslim cemetery on Mount Zion, Beit Safafa, where half the neighborhood are Israeli citizens, although Palestinian, and the other half are Palestinians without Israeli citizenship. There are also special cases of Israeli settlements that have been built inside of Palestinian neighborhoods, such as in Ras al-Amud and Nov Tzion. Har Choma is also problematic because it was built after Oslo, and the Palestinians have not accepted that it will be part of the area included in the annexed areas by Israel as part of a territorial swap. But today, Har Choma is probably too large to reverse. Palestine will be sovereign over all of Palestinian neighborhoods, and Israel will be sovereign over all of Israeli neighborhoods. This is perhaps unprecedented in the world, but Jerusalem is unique and requires unique solutions. Municipal government in the city could either be completely separate municipalities with coordination between them, or one municipal council representing both cities. The municipal government issues are the easiest to resolve. The purpose of municipal government is to serve the day-to-day life needs of the people within the municipality. In Jerusalem, there must be coordination between both sides on issues of infrastructure, transportation, sewage, waste control and treatment, water and electricity supply, and of course on issues of economic development, tourism, antiquities, physical development, zoning, planning, etc. The old city of Jerusalem is certainly the heart of the city and the center of the focal point of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. This area, less than 1 square kilometer, is a powder keg of nuclear proportions in terms of its volatility and potential for disaster. There are 4 quarters, as has already been said. It could be possible to adopt the Clinton parameters to the old city, as well as to the Jewish as well, so that the Jewish quarter would be under Israeli sovereignty and based on demography, and the other 3 quarters would be under Palestinian sovereignty. It could also be possible to adopt a kind of proposal that Prime Minister Olmert offered in 2008 with an international body composed of Israel, Palestine, the United States, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia would govern the old city on behalf of its residents. Another similar proposal was made by a group of Jerusalem experts working with the University of Windsor in Canada, in which an international management company would minister the old city on behalf of its residents. In the center of the heart of the hearts, is of course the Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif, 145,000 square meters of holy space. This is the most holy space for Jews in the world and the 3rd most holy space for Muslims, and Palestinians see themselves as protectors of Al-Aqsa. For Muslims, the entire mount, as referred to as the distant mosque, not only the buildings on the mount are Al-Aqsa, the place where they believe the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven on